Welcome to Wisdom for Life, where we sift through philosophy to find practical advice that you can use in your everyday life. Hi, I'm Dan Hayes, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Greg Sadler. Today we're talking about
Stoic insights from Seneca's book on anger. And, there's a lot to say about this great work of Stoic philosophy. I should say that one of the reasons why I pitched this to Dan in the first place was because I was recently teaching this to my students in my anger and justice class that I'm teaching once again this semester at Marquette University. And so I thought we would double dip a little bit and talk about something that I was already doing some work on, but it's also a text that Dan is very familiar with, right? So,
yeah. But how dare you, Greg?
You mean capitalizing on?
This is my anger.
That's pretty anemic anger. I think that's.
Yeah.
I'm not sure Seneca would actually call that anger. So you got.
There's definitely not a boiling of the spirit.
You have to dial it up a bit. Turn it up to 11. So we should talk about why this book in the first place, right? Dan and I both know that it's a great work of what we could call moral psychology and ethics and philosophy of the emotions, but maybe not everybody is quite as familiar with it. So we'll give you a little rundown on that and then talk about Stoicism just in case anybody doesn't quite know what that is, and then we'll start getting into the real meat. So actually, before we do that, though, do you want to talk about how you ran into this book, and I'll say how I did as well?
I guess this is definitely not the first thing that I ran into within Stoicism. I did find it before or after I started getting into it. But it was definitely useful insights because, I used to be rather angry, especially as a young boy. And Stoicism in general, and this specifically, really enumerates all the potential reasons that, someone would give that anger is a good or should be used and as a tool, and just kind of shatters them. So it's not only that, it's going to give you a whole bunch of insight to ways in which you can either deal with the anger as it arises or to prevent it from happening in the first place.
Yeah, this is actually the first work of Seneca that I myself read, and kind of similar reasons, although I wasn't getting into... I got into Stoicism through Epictetus, and I didn't really pay much attention to Seneca, but then I started getting really interested in using resources from philosophy to work on my own anger, which was out of control for quite a long time. And I knew that Seneca had a book on it, so then I started reading that. And that was my introduction to Seneca's works as a whole. I think a lot of people read his moral letters, or they're sometimes called letters from Lucilius or ethical letters. There's a whole bunch of different titles for it. But this was the first one for me. And like you said, it's got so much packed into it. So let's talk about the book. This is one of many, many treatises on anger from the ancient world where they saw it as a huge problem. Most of these have been lost. We actually get a reference to one of them by this guy, Jerome, who was an Aristotelian, or Hieromenus. And we don't have anything of his work. But there were quite a few of these circulating around, and Seneca's survived. And it's a systematic analysis of anger from a Stoic perspective. And like Dan was just saying, it's got some critical engagement with alternate different views on anger that the Stoics consider wrong. I think that is actually one of the strong points of the work, is it'll say, people say X, here's why X is wrong-headed, right?
Yeah.
So Seneca was a ancient author. He was a Stoic himself. He unfortunately was the advisor to the Emperor Nero, tried to retire from that. It's sort of like that old line of, I keep trying to get out of the game, but they pull me back in. And Nero pulled him back in to have him killed. And so that's not great. But he wrote a number of different works about Stoic philosophy. And one of the cool things I like about Seneca is he doesn't just present the Stoic position, he tells you all about everybody else's positions. And if there's anything good in it, from his point of view, he'll adopt it. Even the Epicureans, who the Stoics, at least some of them, viewed as like their mortal enemies. Seneca is like, well, if they got something useful to contribute, I'll take it on, right?
Yeah, he refers to wisdom as our, common heritage. That, regardless from which school it arises, we should be sharing that, which is kind of interesting in reference to like our current modern technology. That like there's an idea that information wants to be free. And this is from, I believe, the Hacker Manifesto, and this is
okay.
Kind of an extension of this. Like, why are all these academic papers behind paywalls, especially with many of them being, funded by government grants? Then why is this not our common heritage, our common knowledge? But it's a digression from the point that he's happy to dip his toe wherever he can find something good and useful to bring out.
Well, I'm going to piggyback on that digression and actually suggest that, because I've been thinking about this for quite a while because of my own students, maybe we should do an episode on the ethics of, we'll just call it the ethics of piracy. Journal articles, other white papers, things like that people want us to pay lots and lots of money for, that, like you said, somebody else has done the free labor for it, or the government's even like ponied up. Should we feel bad if we get something off of one of these sites and then, use it for some common good? Maybe not. But that's a topic for another day, I think, right?
Yeah.
But that could be interesting. So what should we say about Stoicism, sort of a thumbnail sketch just for anybody who doesn't already have some awareness of it? I mean, I think a lot of people know the term, but they associate it with the stiff upper lip kind of disposition rather than the actual philosophy. Right.
And so, one of the things we're going to actually talk about later on is kind of like the, stuff down your emotions. And the Stoics are, they're like, you should be so in tune with your emotions that you know why they're happening and don't let them carry you off with you. So there's not a trying to suppress the emotions, but to understand why they arise in the first place. But specifically, there's a couple of things that are ideas within Stoicism that are going to be very useful for understanding what he's talking about here. The two that I'm bringing up are indifference and the dichotomy of control.
Okay. So how do the what are the indifference, first of all, for our audience?
So the indifference are, there are things that are good and things that are bad, and everything else is indifferent. And so the things that are actually good or bad are things that are completely within one's own control. Those are the things that you are drawn to, the things that you are averse to, your actions and your opinions and your judgments. Or I guess technically it's your movement towards actions, because actions can be hindered.
True. Yeah.
And so this leaves the vast majority of our life to indifference. Like, your house is indifferent. The money in your bank account is indifferent. Your job is indifferent. Your relationships are technically indifferent, but how you use them or how you interact with these people, these are things that can actually be classified as good or bad.
Okay, well, that's good that you clarified that, because I think a lot of people are going to hear that and they're like, wait a second, my money doesn't matter at all? Is that what you're saying? And the Stoics aren't saying, yeah, just throw it all away. It's no good. You don't need it at all.
They're just saying that, money, as well as all these other things I just said, can be used for either good or bad ends. But it's the things themselves do not carry the value with them.
Do you think that the word neutral works well as a synonym maybe for indifference or not?
Yeah, I think so. That's a fairly, and it's a more common word.
Yeah.
And then the second one here is the dichotomy of control. And so we have this idea of what is a neutral thing or an indifferent. And the things that we should be worried about are not these indifferents, but our actions maybe in reference to these things, especially other people. And so most of the things that people get angry at are going to be indifference.
Yeah.
And one of these central ideas of Stoicism is that you should be focusing on what you can control, indifference you can't control, so focus on the things and don't be disturbed by those things that are not.
Yeah, I was just thinking like Epictetus, and he talks about being hindered, right? So we can be hindered in things that are externals, outside of our control, indifference, and we can't be hindered in our own inner character or will, however you want to express it, all that stuff that's up to us. And when we do get like hindered or impeded, or somebody gets in our way or interferes with us, we get ticked off quite often, because we treat that as if it's like somehow a big action against us. But really, nobody can, according to the Stoics, nobody can actually harm us in the very center of our being. So knowing that can help people out, I think, quite a bit. We should talk about the Stoic view on anger and the emotions. The Stoics think that all of our emotions, and they're not totally unique in this, but they think that our emotions aren't just feelings or like stimulus response. There's a cognitive content there, meaning that we're thinking something as well as feeling something. So, when we're thinking angrily, we think things like, I want to get that SOB, or can you believe the crap that they just pulled, or we think all sorts of other things as well. And the Stoics think that anger is always bad. It's never productive. It's never helpful. It's always something that is negative. So it can't really be used or harnessed for good. It's not, you could say anger is not an indifferent itself, right? Feeling angry is always on the bad side.
Because it is based upon an incorrect judgment. And a judgment is within our control.
Yeah, so, all the emotions are based on judgments, and we can get them right or we can get them wrong. And you're right, one of the things we could say from the Stoic perspective is anytime that you're angry, you've got something wrong. You might have some things right. Maybe you're mad because somebody deliberately, I don't know, you're walking down the street with you're reading your Stoic books, and somebody knocks them out of your hands and says something mean to you, and they do it deliberately to you, right? And all of those are, the books did fall. That's a fact. Maybe their motive, they actually, like, it's on their T-shirt. They say, I'm going to get Dan Hayes, and knock the books out of his hand, right? They spent the time ahead of time to do that. That they're deliberately doing that. But the judgment that we should retaliate and that this is the right thing to do, that's where we're going wrong, right?
Mm-hmm. And so this doesn't say that, like, there isn't a response and that we should totally ignore this.
Yeah.
But to what is the way that one should make a decision and motivate yourself towards an action? And the Stoics, and especially Seneca here, says that anger should never be the basis for your movement towards a retaliatory action. That there might be a need to stop a person from like this doing these things, because this is definitely going to be detrimental to, myself individually, but also kind of generally in society, people are going around like just, causing general chaos.
Yeah.
And so how do we respond to this? How do we correct these particular things, as well as do this without wanting to cause pain? Because that's one of the main things that we use usually is like kind of this eye for an eye. I want to have revenge. And this is part of the reason why our justice system doesn't allow that there's an intermediary between the two of them, because victims of crimes usually feel anger and want retribution, and that actually doesn't result in a really good society.
Yeah, it's kind of indiscriminate. Seneca points that out in the work, that you're a better judge if you may have to inflict punishment, even capital punishment, but you can do it without being angry. Anger doesn't have to be the motivating force. Now, the Stoics also saw anger as interfering with good things. So human beings are rational creatures, which means not just that we can calculate and think, and make arguments, but also that we should feel affection towards other people and be gentle with them and, provide them with assistance. And so anger oftentimes gets in the way of that, right? It'll cut us off from what can we call it, our full human nature.
Right. We are social creatures, and one of the main things that doesn't quite get brought up a lot, especially early on when people like just getting into Stoicism, is that it's incredibly pro-social.
Right.
And that Marcus Aurelius has a line, that we should be working together like two hands, 2 feet, the 2 eyes, the upper and lower row of teeth, to spite or to cause damage to another is to cause damage to myself. And so there's this constant idea that we are part of this, it's cosmopolitanism, that we are all part of a single polis or group of people, and that working against each other is actually working against yourself. And one of these qualities, if you want to go to the the core Stoic virtues, gentleness, affection, and mutual assistance. I believe this is under
justice.
Justice,
yeah. And anger is often isolating. Even if we get angry altogether with a group of people, you think about online mobs, right, where people are all together and they're kind of reinforcing each other and saying awful things to somebody in Twitter or Facebook or pick whatever else you want. They're still they've got blinders on. They're isolated from the rest of everybody else. And there's this tendency to easily think that what you're doing is A-okay without looking carefully at, whether you are crossing all sorts of lines. So, yeah. And, go ahead.
A quick digression, because it made me think of, nowadays, especially within our own culture, of what is it to be, what are the qualities that are put up as exemplified of men?
Right.
And
you mean masculinity, right? What is masculinity?
What is our Western United States version of masculinity put up on a pedestal? And what are things that, if you are them, would be considered that you're not, that you're more feminine or something. There's something to be derided. And gentleness, affection, and mutual assistance are all things that would potentially be put into, this more feminine. If you're doing them, you're not nearly as masculine as you should be.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting too, because the people who want to talk about alpha males, and I always joke around that anybody who worries about whether they're an alpha or a beta, they're definitely a beta. Anybody who calls themselves an alpha male, definitely a beta, because real alpha males wouldn't do that sort of thing, But it's interesting when a man, and it takes strength to actually deal with your anger, be gentle, be vulnerable to others, try to work things out, that will piss off a lot of other guys. They'll be like, "What? Can you believe the crap that he's doing?" And you'll be like, "Buddy, it's none of your business. Why are you so upset about that? Why are you such a snowflake? You tough guy. You got this tough exterior, but you're really like marshmallow on the inside. If that gets to you, And I think that the Stoics could quite easily make sense of that.
Right. And a lot of it is, what is a big exemplified, emotional state is anger.
Yeah.
But to finish, these things, Seneca is making an argument that these are all aspects that a full human should have. and that's kind of at a direct
The pro-social
opposition.
ones, you mean, right?
The
Not the angry
gentleness,
ones.
affection, mutual assistance are all part of justice for being a full, virtuous human being.
Yeah, and there were a lot of people in Seneca's own time. He mostly targets the Aristotelians, but there were others as well who were saying that anger is something noble or necessary or natural or helpful or useful if you want to get things done, if you want, he's got some extreme cases where somebody's like, well, what if somebody's killing your father or raping your mother? And Seneca's like, nobody says you can't stop them, but you don't actually have to get angry in order to do that. As a matter of fact, you might be better off not being angry, so you can approach things in a more careful manner and put an end to this wickedness that's taking place.
Right.
Another thing that the Stoics do, well, Seneca at least brings out. I mean, I don't know that all the Stoics believe this, but Seneca says anger is the worst of all the bad emotions or the vices that we can fall into, and he provides you with a whole bunch of interesting arguments. And I say interesting because I don't consider all of them to be great arguments, but they are interesting to look at. And I don't know, maybe there is something to that. He does point out that anger has this tendency to morph into something that's worse than anger, which he calls brutality, or it's feritas in Latin. So you could like ferality, right? Being like a rabid animal, or cruelty, where a person, the angry person is upset and is being moved by this passion. The cruel person actually just delights in hurting other people. They'll smile while they're doing it, whereas the angry person, their face is all clenched up and stuff like that. And he knows a lot of Roman people who are quite cruel. So,
including Nero.
Yeah.
So the Stoics are like, the word for these emotions, these negative emotions, are pathe, which is what we eventually get pathological from.
Right. Yeah.
And so these things are things that are negative to the point where they can kind of control and take over us. And so what is it taking over but our reason? So anything that can be used but with anger can be done using reason, and it's likely to be more effective.
We should say something. This is a little bit of a technical aspect of Stoicism. It's what we call philosophical anthropology. Like how is the psyche or the personality divided up? And some people in ancient time thought there were like maybe two main parts, like a rational or an irrational part, or maybe the irrational part has a couple different parts. The Stoics thought there was one main thing that they called the ruling part, which was also the rational part, the part that we choose things with. And it's not just rational, that's also where we feel these emotions. And so the emotion, there's sort of like there's only limited space, right? So the more that anger is there, the less that reason can be operative, and vice versa, So that's something worth keeping in mind, especially as we go on. And we should probably move ahead. Instead of talking about we were going to talk about definitions. We'll skip over that. But you've got this Seneca's litany of reasons anger is not a virtue. And I like that term litany, like you're just rattling them off. So do you want to run through them and rattle them off like that?
Sure. Anger has caused great harm to mankind. If anger is more powerful than reason, the only way to control it is to set against it more powerful vice, such as fear. Wherefore, reason is in the position of flying to the aid of vices. How could you? Anger does not benefit you in war. You want your attacks to be thought out and orderly. Anger is prone to rashness. Anger is also not a weapon because it cannot be put down at will. Good qualities become better the stronger they are. Anger is not good in large quantities. Reductio ad absurdum, it cannot be a good quality. Anger is a terrible judge. It is inconsistent, hasty, and can invent crimes where none exist. Anger affects those of weak minds. Anger results in misery. It is better to endure hardship than to give in to anger. Anger leads one to inhuman acts. Anger becomes addictive. Anger can ruin and tear apart whole nations. Anger can lead one to act without thought. Some even become angry with inanimate objects.
Yeah.
So this last one, he uses the reference to who's the so he's a king, and he's angry that the waters are blocking him from doing the attack that he wants. So he goes out and he starts.
It's one of the Persian kings. Was it Darius or Xerxes? I think it's Xerxes, right?
No, it starts with a C. I want to say
Cambyses. He was another one of the Persian kings. He was the one who attacked Egypt. But yeah, there's all sorts of examples of people getting angry with inanimate objects. And this is actually a commonplace of the literature on anger. You see this like later in the Christian monastic literature. John Cassian talks about the monk who goes out into the desert because he's going to get away from all these bastards who are ticking him off, right? And he says, if you don't handle your anger, you're bringing it with you out to the desert. You're going to get angry at your sleeping mat for not rolling upright. You're going to get angry at your pen for not writing correctly. You'll get angry at the wind for blowing on you or not blowing on you. Yeah, people, and Seneca, in analyzing that, he says, how stupid is that? Getting angry at a person kind of makes sense because a person can like deliberately screw with you, right? There's an intention, an agency there, however, mistaken. But an inanimate object doesn't care. It doesn't have any care. It doesn't care or not care because it's not something that can do that sort of mental act, you could say.
It has no intentionality.
Yeah.
And I found my notes. It's Cyrus attacks the sea. And then it gives another example of Julius Caesar destroying a villa because his mother was once imprisoned there. Like you're attacking, or the idea is like, do you ever get angry at a tornado? No one gets angry at the tornado. They know at least nowadays. It's a natural disaster.
I mean, there probably is somebody who gets angry at the tornado, I'm guessing.
But in general, most of us don't get angry at the tornado. We know like it has no intention.
You know what we do get angry at, though? That's inanimate objects. And this could be like, we could talk about this for days. Our technology, right?
Oh, yeah.
You turn on your phone and you pull up an app, and the app like closes itself by itself, and you're like, you SOB, what are you doing there, right? And it's just... it's programs. There's nothing deliberate about it. And you don't, and it's funny too, because Seneca says, well, some people might actually say it's the work person who should have done a better job, the artifacts, and we could be angry at them, right? So your phone breaks, you're like, damn Apple, but most of us don't do that. Most of us get mad at the phone or at the car instead of the Subaru Motor Company, or, the pagination isn't right in the book. We don't get mad at like University of Chicago Press. We get mad at the book itself. And Seneca actually talks about people like ripping pages out of books because something is written wrongly in the book. So, yeah.
This concept always was so alien to me. Like, you see like movies or what, the destroying things because you're angry. Like, I grew up and you watch movies. I don't know. The first one that comes to mind is Citizen Kane. There's this big scene where he like destroys an entire room, and it's like this trope. But like I never got so angry that I was like, I have to destroy something. I might have like punched a pillow once or twice, but like I knew that was going to be able to take the brunt of it.
I've knocked crap off my desk. I remember doing that.
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid, one way that I would not effectively deal with my anger, we had an axe, and we used it for splitting wood and stuff like that. And we had a backyard that went out into a forest. And so my mom would say, when you're angry, go out there and chop down a tree. There's plenty of trees. And we can use the wood, or you can put it into a bonfire, whatever you want to do. Just go out there and chop down a tree. And so I'd go out there, I was mad about something, and I'd hack at that tree for a while. I wasn't a great woodsman at first, so, it was very effective for keeping me busy because it would take a long time to chop the trees down. And I noticed I didn't actually feel any better after I did all that.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, we should move on. We do want to get to a whole bunch of practices, so maybe we'll skip over the discussion about like the different movements in emotion, and we'll save the do we disagree with the Stoics for maybe the end? What do you think?
I
you
think
really
we
want to
should
go into
through
the
those
three?
quickly.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess just to get us there, because like one of the things that you don't like is this idea of how the emotions occur, and then he says that he doesn't think that once you've latched onto the emotion that you can stop it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I think he's a little inconsistent in that too.
The quick idea of what a Stoic emotion is: you've got an impression, a place for reflection, and then you ascend or descend to the emotion. So the impression is like something that would originally someone yelled and called you dumb or something.
Yeah.
Or something worse. So it doesn't matter. But that's the initial moment. You automatically have a response from your unconscious brain. It goes, bam. You should be angry.
Yeah.
And if you don't reflect on that, you're like, yep, it should be. Time to be angry. Stoics says like, there's a place in there that you should be reflecting on these things to then run through that and maybe step back from it.
And not only do they think that you should reflect on it, you do reflect on it. You just don't realize that that's happening. So that's this juncture. So the first part is what they often call a pre-emotion or a proto-passion. Not exactly Seneca's term, but it's good enough. And then the third part is you are now angry and you're out of control. You're acting on that. And in between is this space, which could be like a second, but could also be like minutes long. And you have the opportunity to exercise judgment, to assent, or like you said, dissent, to not buy into something. And it's interesting because Seneca also uses two other important words there. One of them is reason. You can think about this at that point, although it's maybe tough. And then he even uses the word will, voluntas in Latin. You choose whether you go along with this thing that's pushing you, right? So you're not like choosing in a vacuum. Somebody has called you, I don't know, hey, a-hole, and you're like, are you talking to me? And they're like, yeah, I'm definitely talking to you, buddy. Now you're starting to get riled up, right? And part of what you're choosing to do is to buy into all these other assumptions and judgments like, hey, I shouldn't have to put up with that crap. I should go punch that guy in the nose. That's the way to handle this, or flip him off or whatever else it's going to be. So, I think that on the whole, this makes sense. The thing that I just don't buy is that once we've like crossed the threshold from the second part to the third part, that now we're totally out of control and there's nothing we can do. Seneca seems a bit more fatalistic about that than some of the other Stoics, like Epictetus, who thinks that you can, while you're angry, still reason with yourself, or somebody else who's angry, you can reason with them. It's just real hard,
Mm-hmm.
So I think I kind of lean more towards Epictetus than Seneca on this, but I think it's useful for a lot of people to, it's useful as a practice because you can be like, okay, this is my moment of opportunity. Let's not screw it up. I'm starting to slide into anger. If I don't get a hold of it right now, it's going to take me away with it. That might be very helpful, right?
Right. So how do we stem these in the beginning? This is going to be one of the big things we're going to go. Is there another one of these disagreements that you really want to bring up?
Well, yeah, and it's connected to this like third stage of things. So Seneca tells us that anger, if you're actually able to control it, it's not really anger. And I think that's just wrong. I think you can be pretty angry and have some measure of control. It just takes a lot of work. And he's got these things, and he's not completely consistent on this, where he says what the animals feel is not really anger. It's only human beings who feel it. I just don't buy that. I think that we're closer to the other animals. Maybe they don't get angry about exactly the same stuff that we do. I mean, you can call them names and it's not really going to bother them the way it bothers us. But take away a dog's food while they're eating, they'll get angry.
Yeah.
Or yank their tail,
Yeah.
Or
They'll
even
snap at you.
Yeah, or even like fake them out with the ball. You throw the ball, but you don't really throw it. After a while, they'll get ticked off at you, and they might even bite you for that.
And I think it really comes down to like their idea of Stoic physics, which is like everything, like and specifically that what makes humans different from the rest of the animals in the world is that we have this little piece of logos, and so it's very dichotomous. Either you have it or you don't.
Yeah.
And so if you have it, then you can actually have anger because you are able to think about it. I guess from modern science, I'm very suspect of most of the Stoic physics, and
yeah, me too.
As we see, there are many creatures and animals that have really quite high intelligence, and it's a spectrum of from very low intelligence to us at very high intelligence. There are a couple of other species, dogs and dolphins and octopi and the great apes,
crows and ravens, yeah.
That are quite intelligent, and they might not have the exact same experience, but there's a close enough analogy that there's definitely like an angry state that I could see them being in.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the practice. I mean, unless you want to talk about the thing that...
Yeah, quickly. We kind of brought it up a little bit when you're talking about you're going out to...
cut down the trees.
Cut down the trees, yeah. That he says that if you're feeling angry, which is also kind of counter to this idea that you can stop it, you can use reason to overcome it. It's you're feeling angry, you're now angry. Well, don't show it physically outwardly, just kind of stew on it, sit on it. And I guess I disagree with him. Here's there are a number of techniques that potentially help, and some might work for some people, and some work for others.
Yeah.
So, for example, I knew that one of my coping techniques when I was younger was to I just need to go for a walk, and so I went for a 20-minute walk to get away from things, to move myself away from the thing that was causing me anger in the first place, or the person. Yeah. And if I couldn't do that, it made things worse for me.
Did it help you to go on the walk?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They use that in a lot of anger management stuff. And I think one of the things that often gets left out of that is if you go on the walk, you have to pay attention to where you're walking, or, look at the nature, or you can't just keep thinking about why you're ticked off, because then you just come back from the walk still ticked off, right? You can't ruminate, you might say. And I think a lot of people leave that out.
Yeah, the rumination gets you. So practice and insight.
Yeah, what are your favorite ones from Seneca's on anger? There's so many of them. We're not going to be able to cover too many.
I guess I'll grab one about associate with good-tempered people.
Okay, that's a good one. Yeah.
And so we copy the habits of those people from around us. Yeah, there's that line of you're the average of the 5 closest people that and that we are what we repeatedly do, and we tend to do the things that our friends do. And so, for example, when I was a kid, I was fairly straight-laced, but there's a couple of times where I got into trouble. And so, one point in time, there's the valve caps for cars, right?
Okay.
And some are metal. They're nice and shiny. And so when I was in elementary school, a couple of the kids I knew were all into stealing these little things. Not to empty the tires or anything, just to like have these little metal caps. I did that until like I was doing it and someone noticed that there's a kid screwing out with his car and came out and yelled at me, and I was like, oh, I'm done with that.
We had people in high school who used to steal hood ornaments, but not just any. It would have to be like, Cadillacs or Dodge Rams, or, if they could find a Porsche, they would definitely steal that. So I think that's pretty common, that kind of behavior. But you're right. If you spend a lot of time around people who manage their anger poorly, even if you're like practicing some restraint, you're probably going to be affected by them sooner or later. And if you're unfortunate enough to come from, say, a family where anger has been handled poorly, you're probably behind everybody else, right?
Mm-hmm. You have certain tools that you've been taught on how to deal with problems, and if anger is the one that is demonstrated to you, then you're going to fit that into, I'm in this situation, I should be angry. It reminds me of you see a little kid, and they're learning to walk, and they fall down, and then they look up at you to see how that they should respond.
Oh, right.
And so if you are super concerned, they get concerned and they start crying. If you're like, oh yeah, that's good, get right back up. They're like, yes, we should do that. And they're mirroring you. Yeah.
I mean, it also reminds me of a point that you made a bit earlier about masculinity within our society, and it could even be expanded not to masculinity, but just to being like viewed as a tough person or as assertive, right? Because I think a lot of women get in on this as well, particularly in certain fields. So, a lot of people use anger as a substitute for feeling and dealing with other emotions, particularly negative ones like grief or fear or envy or sadness,
despair.
Despair, I think. A lot of people would much rather feel angry because anger feels like it's getting something done, even if it isn't, right? And these other emotions, you feel them, you feel kind of out of control, like you don't really get to decide things. Anger has this illusion of control, and especially if you're coming from like a culture or a group where that is being rewarded, right? Mm-hmm. Then it's really easy to fall into that, and it becomes almost like a habit. Instead of feeling pain, you feel anger. Instead of feeling sadness, you feel anger, right? You might even feel anger afterwards when you normally would feel sad about like having lost your temper. You get mad at other people for having made you lose your temper.
Yeah, we're incredible at pattern recognition, and we're going to match the patterns of the things that we observe.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So what's one of your practices or insights?
Well, I think coming back to this thing about assertiveness and masculinity, Seneca spends a lot of time trying to combat this idea that anger is something either noble or brave, or to use another term that we don't use all that much, magnanimous or great-souled, being kind of a high-minded person. And he considers arguments that people put forward. It was common at the time to talk about the Scythians and the Germans as being free peoples who have this, anger, irascible element in them, and look at how cool they are. There's kind of a weird, worship of the barbarian. And he says, you don't want to emulate them. Look at their societies. They're all messed up, They can't govern themselves. They can't live in an orderly way. Their bravery doesn't really work out that great. It turns into recklessness. They seem like really great fighters, but we Romans kick their butts because they don't have organization and order, and they don't because they're, allowing themselves to be too riled up. And then right after that, he talks about, animals that we look at that, and we're like, ooh, look at those tough animals. Look at a lion, And he's like, why the hell would you want to imitate a lion? There's so many better animals for you to imitate. And it's better the more ferocious it is. So the most ferocious lion that eats all the other lions, even, is that what you think is a good thing? And I think there's something to that. Even lions, who can be pretty tough, and a lot of lions die at the hands of other lions. They also display affection towards each other and their young, and they spend a lot of time actually just lying around too. And then he talks about angry people. One of the other things that people are often inclined to believe in his society and ours, angry people are more straightforward. They tell you what they think, there's no guile about them. And he says, well, okay, they're better by comparison to crafty people who conceal everything. But this is not the same thing as like being on the up and up. This is just being uncontrolled and incautious and rash. They'll say stupid things that they shouldn't say because they're angry. They're not really like honest. They're just unable to control themselves. And then, he talks about like greatness of soul. This was very important for the ancients, and I think it is for us too. We don't conceptualize it enough, but being able to be like independent of what's happening. He says, and this is a quote from him, there's no more certain proof of greatness than remaining unprovoked by whatever happens. The lofty mind is ever peaceful, firmly moored in its tranquil anchorage, suppressing all of anger's components, controlled and orderly. And I think there's something to that. You get into a situation where people are trying to get you going. Being able to not get provoked by them, that is you getting to remain in control, being above them in a certain way, especially if they're doing it specifically because they want to get a reaction out of you, and then they get upset when they don't get that, right? They're like, I can't believe that you didn't respond to that. And you can be like, I don't care what you think, buddy. You don't
there's
matter.
a common litany or refrain on the internet. You mad, bro? That they're trying to get a rise out of you.
That's right. Yeah,
and they're trying to push your buttons.
I will say too, as a bit of digression, it's amazing on the internet to me how many people who I think are probably emotionally immature themselves will attribute you saying, no, you got that wrong. Because people will put comments on all sorts of videos that I do, and I'll say, no, you got Hegel wrong there. You got Nietzsche wrong there. And one of their reactions is, I don't know why you're getting angry about this. And I'll be like, what in what I said makes you think that I'm angry? Mm-hmm. How is it that you're reading this in and projecting that? I actually had somebody today who said something kind of boneheaded, and I corrected him about it. And he wrote me an email, and it was, he was, apologizing for antagonizing me. And I was like, you didn't antagonize me. Where are you getting this from? You're projecting. And the answer is they're treating you as if you're like them. They would get angry if somebody said something wrong on the internet, right? So they think that that's you, I think there's a lot of people out there. Yeah, that project, entirely. And I think the internet has probably worsened that, maybe.
Yeah. And the other thing that came out of here as a slight digression is this honesty that comes with anger, this idea that honesty. And the first thing that came to mind was the Brett Kavanaugh, Supreme Court Justice, who
when he was at his confirmation hearing, you mean?
Yeah, and he at one point got very, very angry. Because it's like that these accusations are baseless, and thus uses anger to try to instill an idea of honesty. If he's honest or not, it should not be defined by his anger, and as you said, it should be more, him being incautious or foolish than honest.
On that point too, a lot of times people will say things that at the time they feel are true, but then later on they look at them and I can't believe I said that to my partner, my coworker, my boss, pick whoever it's going to be, my child, So anger doesn't necessarily produce honesty. It makes you more liable to say what it is on your mind, which could be completely false and wrong and uncharitable,
Right. Makes you rash.
Yeah.
So another insight is, to cut out those things that aggravate you.
Yeah.
And so, the Stoics are all about this idea of like trying to increase your ability to deal with these externals in a more rational way. But they also realize that people aren't going to be able to just turn a switch and change their way that they interact with things. And so until you have progressed enough that these things are not going to disturb you anymore, you need to figure out a way to remove these things from yourself so that you're not constantly being triggered into an angry state. And so, cut out things that aggravate you. Remove yourself from things that tend to make you angry. He puts out as example law, courts, and politics.
Yeah. And
politics is definitely a through line to our current world.
Yeah, I mean, think about how it used to be back in the day, right? Let's think about Seneca's day, before there's even like newspapers or stuff like that. In order to find out what's going to happen politically, you kind of have to be there, or you got to know somebody who can tell you, the Senate today did this and so said this, right? Otherwise, you don't have a clue what's happening, right? And you're probably better off not knowing it. Whereas we, at the touch of our fingertips, have like access to thousands of potentially anger-producing media sources, some of which that's their entire business model, right? So
here's some of my little anger Skinner box that's beeping at me all the time.
Yeah, true. Yeah, and he suggests there may be some fields of study that we should avoid if we're prone to getting too frustrated, let's say you're not good at music, right? And somebody's like, yeah, you should learn to play the guitar. And you're like, okay, fine. I'll teach myself a guitar book, and there'll be tutorials, and you just can't get your fingers to work, right? You're going to get pissed off, and maybe you'll even smash the guitar,
Right. Like, especially if you've got smaller hands, so you can't actually wrap your fingers all the way around.
Or your hands are too big.
There you go. And so, he says, like, know where your talents lie, and don't try to excel at things that you know that you're not going to excel at. You might want to dabble or...
Yeah. That's an interesting one, because in our current existence, right, there's way too many opportunities for you to compare yourself against super talented people, because you can see them on YouTube, right? And then you feel like crap about yourself, and then now you get angry.
But it's okay. Was it sucking at something is the first step of being sort of good at something.
True.
So, and you should never be the only person that you should compare to yourself is the person that you were yesterday. So, or another quote on comparison is the thief of happiness.
Oh, that's good. Where does that one come from? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
I like that one. Yeah. Yeah, because with comparison very often will come envy and jealousy and, a wish to pull others down to your level. None of those things are helpful for us. So we probably have enough time to talk about one more. So,
yeah. How about you tell me?
Yeah, so I like this one that he talks about really late in book 2. And you could call it, he doesn't call it this, but I think we could call it, why aren't you thinking about this? You're so stupid. He says we get upset not just because we think we're wronged, but because we think we've been unfairly wronged. And so we have this idea, this is like a judgment or an assumption, we shouldn't have suffered these things, or these things are unexpected. We feel that things that are contrary to our expectations are, as he puts it, inappropriate, meaning they're unsuited to how things are. And we're often super unrealistic about how things go. So he talks about things that happen at home. I mean, if you have an apartment or a house or a dorm room, things break down. That's the natural way things go. You know, you buy something, it's not going to stay pristine forever. Just like when you buy a car, right? You take that car off the lot, it's already losing value. And as soon as you take it off the lot, things start to like, something goes wrong. A bird craps on your window, you know, the wipers don't work quite the way they're supposed to. You start hearing a little noise. If you let that sort of thing get to you, rather than saying, well, this is what happens with things, you're going to be really upset. And then he talks about enemies. And he says, are enemies trying to harm us? Shouldn't we expect that? I mean, if people don't like us, if people have it in for us, why in the hell would we think that they're not going to screw with us? You know, he says we judge that we should be undisturbed even by our enemies. And then he says, how is it strange if bad deeds proceed from bad people? You know, and you know, there's bad people, there's good people, there's a lot of people in between. People are going to let us down. You know, not everybody is going to be into the things that we're into. People are going to make dumb mistakes here and there and then not, you know, admit them. This is not unexpected. This is like, if you're realistic about human beings and your experiences, then you should kind of be okay with that sort of stuff. And so he says, well, what makes us so inclined to anger? Ignorance, you know, maybe not knowing how things go, or arrogance, thinking that somehow our experience should be different than everybody else's. So, I mean, think about when you go to a restaurant, right? All the different things that can go wrong there. You went to the restaurant last time and the food was so good and the service was so good and you were there on a date with this person and it was so much fun. And now you're going back with a friend and you're like, oh, we got to go to this really great place. It might have been total chance that you just walked in, you threaded a needle, right? The good cook was on service that night. The best server was on, everything was coming together properly. That might not be the way things normally go, you know? Or, you order something from Eat Street and it comes and it's a little cold. Well, hell, what did you expect to happen? Yeah. I mean, it probably sat there on the counter for 10 minutes and then it's in somebody's car and then they got to bring it to your place. So your soup is a little cold. Put it in the microwave.
Right. And the Stoics are really consistent with this, with other emotions as well. Like they talk about, you have all these people that you love in your life. If you're not expecting them to die, then you are not expecting them to be human. So your sadness is in part your misjudgment about the nature of humanity.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
we're getting close to the end. So do you want to bring us out on a final quote?
Yeah, I'm going to bring us out on two because, there's a quote from Seneca talking about how we suffer more often in imitation than in imagination and reality. And this is the whole thing about judgments. And so that, we deliberately make ourselves angry. And so that's my last little insight. But now we will leave you with the word Seneca. Anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it.